In Hong Kong has been Dr. Jane Goodall, primatologist, and underlining the role of her not-for-profit organisation focusing on environmental education. Her research among chimpanzees and gorillas in Africa is legendary on TV for a period over 50 years and a world away from Hong Kong's cityscape.
Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we?
So Dr. Goodall, in Hong Kong you're hosting an evening with Jane Goodall, and that dovetails with your institute's operations, of course raising money, but how significant is that process?
I believe that Hong Kong is a centre for businesses. I expect in the future that we can do some quite serious fundraising here. At the moment, the fundraising is all geared towards supporting our youth program in Hong Kong itself, because this is where you have to start, you know. And there are 27 Jane Goodall institutes around the world. Our youth program, Roots and Shoots, is in 121 countries. We are indeed a global organization, but each of the institutes, of which Hong Kong is one, it deals with local problems. Only in some countries, if it's possible to send money out, they help us with the Africa programs because we can't raise money there.
So do I detect from your answer that you plan to look much more globally in raising money, and perhaps Hong Kong is the sort of place you can do that?
No, I think the Roots and Shoots program is actually linking young people around the world. So as we grow Roots and Shoots in Hong Kong, and that's really priority number one because it's still very small. It hasn't been going very long. There's 1,500 individual members, and that's tiny compared to, you know, we've got 16,000 active groups around the world, and a group can be a whole school. So that's an awful lot of young people, preschool through university. So we're linking these young people around the world through the internet. We just had the first Roots and Shoots Youth Summit for Asia. So there were 700 young people, mostly from Asia, with just a few from Africa, Australia. And that was just last weekend. I was able to go in for the last day of it. It was a 3-day event. And, you know, when you bring young people together from the different countries, the synergy between them, the energy, the passion that's roused, and we don't listen enough to young people. You know, they have such wisdom these days. It's almost as though we've damaged the planet to such an extent that the children are rising up and becoming wise beyond their years in their efforts to try and heal some of the scars that we've inflicted.
You're celebrated in your work as a primatologist, primarily in Tanzania, and you also, I believe, look at the integration of primates and people. Does that really work? Has that really happened?
Well, it's not really integrating the primates and the people. It's helping the people understand. Like Gombe National Park, where the chimpanzees that I've been studying live, it's tiny. It's only 30 square miles. In the early 90s, I flew over this entire area and saw that outside the park, the trees had completely gone. It was forest, 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 and now it's a tiny patch of forest surrounded by bare fields. And it was obvious looking down. Soil erosion, soil losing its fertility, over-farmed, people struggling to survive. So how could we possibly even try and save the chimps when the people were in this dire situation? So that led to our Take Care program, TACARE. That is a very holistic way of improving the lives of the people living initially just around the park, 12 villages. We're now in 42 villages outside Gombe and moving down to the south where there's some intact forest. We didn't just march into the villages like a bunch of white people saying, we're really sorry for you, this is what we think we'll do to make your lives better. No, Tanzanian team go in, sit down in the African way, listen to the elders. How do you think we could help you best? And they didn't care about conservation to start with, not at all. It was growing more food, health, better health, and education for their children. So we began like that. And now this adding one dimension after another, microcredit for groups of women so that they can start their own little development projects, which must be environmentally sustainable. Scholarships to keep girls in school, because it's all around the world the case that as women's education improves, family size tends to drop. So we provide family planning information. as their lives have improved, they have agreed to put village land, and these are the villages around Gombe, to put village land aside for conservation in such a way that the trees are now growing up all around the edge of the park and forming a buffer, and corridors are moving out, green leafy corridors, towards other remnants of forest with chimpanzees in them. So it's restoring the forest around Gombe, and it's moving down to protect the forest, which hasn't yet been destroyed, further to the south.
So your vision really will take a lot of money, but how do you propose to do that?
I'm not sure. I would hope that we can raise some. We, at the moment, do an awful lot of this work on grants we've got from the United States government. USAID have provided massive funding for these programs because it fits right into their development goals. They actually love us and keep saying, we've got this money for that, could you apply for it? So this is how we've grown quite considerably. And another aspect which is, and again I think Hong Kong could play quite a major role here, and that is the carbon trading, the carbon credits. If you can pay an African government or the people not to cut their trees down, that provides you with a big chunk of forest which will absorb CO2. If you cut it down, not only is the forest not absorbing CO2, but as it gets burned or whatever, you know, you're massively increasing your CO2 emissions into the environment. So we're now qualifying for this money from the Norwegian government.
And that really shows that you are a supporter of free trade principles. Is that somewhere that you see as important in Asia particularly?
I'm quite sure we can raise the awareness. We're starting, you know, and through the Roots and Shoots program, through the young people who influence their parents all the time and their grandparents.
So how do you see the attitudes of young people, particularly in Asia, particularly in China and Hong Kong?
Well, their attitudes are changing. I mean, since I've been coming to China and Hong Kong, which is about 14 years now, I've seen major changes, certainly in mainland China, where we have Roots and Shoots quite far flung. And, you know, to go back to your previous question about is Hong Kong the kind of place to raise funds for supporting some of these projects in Africa, it's probably more likely to raise funds to support the projects in Asia, where the same deforestation is going on, the same kinds of poverty in some countries. I can only retire once the world has been saved.